Welcome back, aspirants, to another special Explainer Masterclass right here at Rungta IAS Academy. I'm your Faculty 1 for GS Paper 2, International Relations.
And I'm Faculty 2. Today we're diving deep into a really dynamic, headline-making topic. We're talking unilateral sanctions, energy security, and of course, India's strategic autonomy. There's a lot to unpack, so let's jump right in.
Now, to ground our discussion, take a look at this potential 15 marker for your mains examination. Discuss the implications of expiring U.S. oil waivers on India's strategic autonomy.
The context here is absolutely crucial for you to understand. The United States had granted these temporary waivers allowing us to import oil from sanctioned nations. But the waiver specifically for Russian oil is set to expire on May 16th. Let's set the geopolitical stage for what this actually means.
So, to really grasp the global pressure India is under, we need to look at the diplomatic responses happening right now. We recently saw a very significant meeting attended by representatives of two of the most heavily sanctioned countries on the planet.
Exactly. We're talking about Russian Foreign Ministers Sergei Lavrov and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Their ongoing coordination is a perfect representation of the intense geopolitical tightrope that New Delhi is currently walking.
So the big question is, how is India reacting on the ground? Well, let's look at the hard numbers, because UPSC examiners love data-backed answers. Based on real-time analytics from Kepler, our import of Russian crude oil has actually seen a massive surge.
That's right. It's a huge jump. In April, our imports sat at about 1.57 million barrels per day. But just looking at the start of May, this skyrocketed to 1.96 million barrels per day.
Now, you might be wondering, why the sudden, massive surge right before the waiver expires? Well, the answer really lies in severe supply chain disruptions.
Spot on. Indian refiners are basically rushing to secure stable, guaranteed supplies from Moscow because the alternative routes flowing from West Asia are completely choked up. The blockades we're seeing on the Strait of Hormuz are creating these massive logistical bottlenecks that we simply cannot ignore.
And this creates a pretty stark commercial reality for us.
It really does, because despite this huge surge in volume, it's not exactly a cheap alternative. Russian crude is currently carrying a premium of up to $5 for every single barrel for Indian importers. I think this really highlights the sheer desperation to secure our energy supplies amidst all this global instability.
Which, of course, brings us to Washington's stance. These month-long waivers were initially granted because of the ongoing war in West Asia, and India definitely utilized that breathing room. But that window is rapidly closing. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently stated, regarding these requests from vulnerable countries, that he wouldn't imagine another extension. You have to remember, the waiver on Iran already lapsed, and U.S. officials are clearly indicating there won't be any further leniency for Russian oil either. Okay, let's pause here, because for GS2, you need absolute foundational conceptual clarity. There is a critical difference you must highlight in your mains answers: UN sanctions versus unilateral coercive measures.
Absolutely crucial point. UN sanctions are backed by international law and the UN Charter. Unilateral measures, like those imposed solely by the US, are non-UN sanctions. And India's traditional, highly principled position has always been that we simply do not recognize or accept non-UN sanctions.
And this principle is articulated perfectly by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. He argues, and I quote, "Unjustifiable measures cannot substitute dialogue, nor can pressure replace diplomacy." Essentially, he is asserting that unilateral coercive measures are totally inconsistent with international law, and they disproportionately harm developing countries. Definitely jot this quote down. It's an excellent one to drop into your essays. But here is where you score those extra marks, the nuance. UPSC examiners are looking for you to contrast this principled stand with our practical reality. Exactly. While the government strictly maintains its traditional stance against non-UN sanctions on paper, in practice, commercial realities often force compliance. We've had to comply with U.S. sanctions on oil from Iran and Venezuela in the past, and it directly impacts strategic trade, like the development of the Chabahar port. It is just a constant, delicate balancing act. So, at the end of the day, what is our ultimate guiding principle? Well, it's national interest. Consider the words of External Affairs spokesperson Rungta Jaiswal.
Right. When he was directly asked if India would cut oil imports from Russia without a waiver, he simply stated that the government's policy is guided by the interests of 1.4 billion Indians. This is the core concept you must articulate to the examiner. Our foreign policy is fundamentally dictated by our domestic energy needs.
All right, let's quickly summarize and consolidate this. Here are your key takeaways to synthesize into your mains answers. First, energy security constraints. We absolutely have to fuel a rapidly growing economy despite these geopolitical blockades. Second, navigating unilateral coercion, how we strategically manage diplomatic pushback against non-UN sanctions. And third, practicing strategic autonomy, making sovereign, independent choices that benefit our citizens regardless of any superpower pressure. Before we wrap up, aspirants, I want you to imagine you are sitting in the hot seat for your personality test. The board asks you, how should India balance its energy security with the pressure of unilateral U.S. sanctions? Faculty 1, think carefully about everything we've unpacked today, the Kepler data, that $5 premium, and the tension between our principled stance and practical reality. Synthesize all of this to formulate your own balanced, highly analytical answer. Thank you so much for joining us in this Rungta IAS Academy Masterclass. Keep studying hard, stay focused, and we'll see you in the next explainer.